I've been on a carnivore diet now known as the lion diet for the past 3.5 years. One of my viewers told me that I have to watch this interview with Casey and Calley Means because it's mind-blowing. So I thought, well, if it's that good, I'm going to have to watch it with my good friends here on Ferrigno Freedom.
You are a lobbyist and you are a Stanford-educated physician.
Graduating top of my class with honors in medical school and went on to a very competitive surgical subspecialty.
Okay, so I'm just saying that because normally I dismiss credentials out of hand, but these are real credentials and they matter, I think, to your credibility. Okay.
I think that the unfortunate thing is that doctors don't really understand because every level of our education is systematically focused on blinding us from thinking about root causes.
The criminal devil's bargain is that it's highly tied to the healthcare industry. When a child gets sick or any American gets sick with a chronic condition, with diabetes, obesity, kidney disease, heart disease, whatever, they go on a lifetime medication. They go on the metformin, they go on the statin, they have lifetime treatments, and they keep racking up more comorbidities. But you don't die, you just suffer.
You look at what's happening in children, a child born in a hospital in the United States today, within hours of coming from source into this, into this body, the first thing that happens to them is pharmaceutical intervention without really asking, there's barely informed consent about this. That child's eyes are smeared with erythromycin ointment and they're given a hepatitis B vaccine in their first day of life. And what are these two things for? I mention this because it's just emblematic of how we're put on the pharma treadmill from the moment we are born in this country for reasons that are very strange. The erythromycin ointment is to prevent chlamydial infections of the eye, which we test women for chlamydia. So why would every baby in the United States need this ointment if the mom doesn't have it? And the Hep B vaccine is for hepatitis B, which is a sexually transmitted disease and IV drug user disease, of course, which babies are not going to be exposed to. And yet every single baby in America is getting the intervention. So from literally the day we are born, we're on this treadmill.
So, why not test the pregnant mother for those?
They do.
Okay, so
they give it to the women who, even if they have tested negative,
which
they give
would
it
be
to
the
babies.
overwhelming majority.
Absolutely.
So I don't understand, why would you treat a child on his first day of life for illnesses for a fact he doesn't have and isn't going to get?
So this is what I saw working for pharma. So let's get out of the passion of this debate and just talk about the economic incentives. Let's take the Hep B, okay? There's actually no dynamic in American capitalism like the vaccine schedule, because the second you get something on that schedule, the government's paying hundreds of billions of dollars for a product that's then mandated for every single American living. So I'm just speaking again, let's not even get into the efficacy of vaccines.
No, we're talking math
from
here.
An academic. I'm talking math. Working with the pharma industry, it's a huge economic imperative to get more and more vaccines on the schedule. You couldn't watch the Olympics this past couple weeks ago without seeing just ad after ad for actually new vaccines. This is big business, right? Hundreds of billions of dollars. And again, once you get it approved, what happens? It's paid for everyone. And you have the most trusted institutions in the world calling anyone a war criminal for even asking a question about it. So this is well known by the industry.
And can I just say, so we this will appear on all kinds of different social media platforms, but maybe the biggest is YouTube, owned by Google. And they will censor this, they will demonetize this video. Just so far, you have not attacked vaccines, but you are showing evidence of some skepticism of their efficacy or the need for them. And YouTube will demonetize this video for what you just said. You're a Stanford-educated physician, but YouTube has decided you're not allowed to say this.
And I think this is such an important conversation, because I'd ask everyone listening, if they can still listen to this, is why is the media, by the way, YouTube and the media are heavily funded by pharma. Pharma is the number one funder of mainstream news media and one of the largest funders, just demonstrably, just factually, it's just a fact, for YouTube ads. You can't watch a YouTube video without seeing pharma ads. So just like they're funding and have a direct line. As we talked about this last time, working for these industries, we paid tech companies, we paid media companies, not even to influence consumers, but to have a direct line to them. It's part of the public affairs strategy, right? We know that if we can fund a large part of YouTube's ad budget, we have a direct line of communication to those companies. And then we have studies from Harvard that we've paid for too, saying that it's anti-science to say anything that questions our products, which we can jam down the throats of the people that we now have a direct line of communication
right.
to.
So the direct line is not to consumers. That's of lesser concern. The direct line is to the media companies, so you can affect censorship.
That's right.
Just as an economic fact, 80% of NIH grants have a conflict of interest. There's very little conflict of interest rules for academic studies. So the game is clear. You fund the academic studies and you have the seal of Harvard, the seal of the NIH, saying that these products, these pharmaceutical products are perfect. And then you use those studies to influence the tech companies and the media companies that you've also paid and have a direct line of communication that there's misinformation. Let's get back to Hep B, but I just want to make one macro point. It's the selective outrage. Why are we so concerned about talking about vaccines? Why is it such an impetus from our trusted institutions that you are a horrible parent if you even ask a question about 72 shots to your kids? And why isn't there that level of urgency around childhood nutrition?
Or childhood chronic disease.
Or childhood chronic disease. Why is it, we can't possibly expect parents not to load their kids with a bunch of sugar and all these toxic ingredients? And by the way, those people can't afford whole food. It's actually racist and classist to even suggest people should be able to afford organic food. We can't possibly expect parents, to have non-toxic food. But when it comes to pharmaceutical interventions, there's no price too high. And if you don't follow it to a T, you're a terrible person. Why?
I can tell you this, when it comes to the cost, it's one of the biggest questions I get about a carnivore way of eating. People will say, who can afford to live that way? Who can afford to eat meat all the time? I don't typically go to fast food restaurants anymore, but occasionally I'll go by McDonald's and pick up some hamburger patties if I'm out and about and I'm hungry and I haven't had anything to eat yet. And I noticed the prices at some of these places are way higher than I remember a value meal being. I remember a high-priced value meal might be $5.99 or $6.99. Now it's like $14, $15 for a high-end, the upsized version of a value meal. And I think to myself, who in the world is paying that much for junk food, for fast food, when you can have a steak for about the same price? And I don't mean just any steak. I mean, a lot of times you could have an 18 or 20 or 22 ounce ribeye steak for less than what you're paying for this garbage food you get at a Burger King or somewhere like that. You remember in the movie Falling Down when he ordered the burger and it looks so beautiful on the screen? It's like big and plump and juicy, but then when you get it, it's a squashed looking, disgusting looking thing. That's what people are willing to pay that much for every day. And then they're going to turn around and tell me that eating a steak every day is too expensive. And then on top of that, every time they stop and get gas, they pick up a bag of chips and a bottle of soda that cost them $4 for something that even in the grocery store would have cost them a portion of that. And they're overpaying on those as well. So on top of all the things that you're spending money on, you're having to spend all this extra money on healthcare now, and they're not giving you any actual healthcare because they're not treating the root cause of your problem. They're just getting deeper into your pockets. How can you ask me how this is affordable when you're spending so much more in other areas? Don't just look at your grocery bill and say, oh, my grocery bill went up, so I can't afford to do this. You got to look at other areas of life where you're not spending as much as you used to, like medical, like the convenience store situation, what you're getting out of the food that you buy from the grocery store. One of the things that I used to do a lot of when we bought a lot of processed food and a lot of vegetables and things that would sit as leftovers, then when we would go to get those leftovers, we open it up and it's covered with fuzz and things like that you don't want to be eating. I don't ever have that happen on an all meat diet because that meat gets eaten. One of the things about spending more money on the food you eat is you tend to say, you know what, this wasn't cheap. I'm going to make sure that I use it all. But when it's fairly inexpensive, when it's kind of cheap and affordable, it's like, just throw it away if it runs out. And more than half of what we used to buy as far as food goes would get thrown away. Well, that costs your budget as well. Now, I don't waste anything. So all of these things have to be taken into consideration when you're thinking about ways to fight back against this. Hey, it's Dante Ferrigno. I just wanted to thank you first of all for watching this video, but I also wanted to tell you about my merch shop. I have a link in the description for a bunch of different items I've put together for you to be able to show your support for the carnivore lifestyle, and every purchase helps me to keep doing what I'm doing here on Ferrigno Freedom.
Is it when we have 9 out of 10 killers of Americans are preventable lifestyle conditions, when 95% of medical costs go towards reversible chronic conditions that Casey's talking about, why isn't there that urgency of the medical community educating parents about why people are getting sick? And really the only vitriol, the only thing that's being censored, the only thing that's being enforced from the top down is absolute adherence to pharmaceutical products. Why during COVID, which was a metabolic condition, this was a disease that attacked weak immune systems. This was a disease that only killed people that were overweight or metabolically dysfunctional. Americans died at a much higher rate than European or Asian countries. Why wasn't there the same emphasis on hardening up our immune systems and attacking the root cause of that? And it was all the airtime was around a pharmaceutical solution. This doesn't actually make sense, but it gets to the money. So working for the pharma companies, there's just nothing better than getting on the vaccine schedule. And that should not be a controversial comment, right? If you have a list of drugs that are mandated for every single American and paid for by that government, you want to get on that schedule. So
well,
there's
it's a controversial comment. It's not allowed. It's a verboten comment. You're not allowed to say that. They will demonetize this video for what you just said.
And I would ask...
What does that tell you?
I would ask the media companies and ask YouTube to have the same passion for childhood chronic disease and nutrition as they do for enforcing unanimity on pharmaceutical injections for kids.
So just to...
Maybe try not being evil? I think that used to be Google's mantra when they first started. Don't be evil. When you're supporting something that's causing kids and families and people to be sicker and more miserable and wasting all their money on healthcare that doesn't help them get healthier, wouldn't you call that evil? I would.
Amen. I couldn't agree more. It's infuriating. It's worse than that. It's evil. Again, video just demonetized. Worth it. But let me ask, so to the specifics of the Hep B shot.
Yeah,
my video too.
I'm sure all my 4 children had it. I didn't even know
We had it.
Got it.
We
Yeah.
had it too.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah.
What is there just take the other side for a second.
Yeah.
Like, is there a reason that we would do this?
I pushed, I welcome any doctor to respond to this. I pushed leading medical experts on this. I'm like, okay, so a child's born, let's just take the side. The child's born, Hep B is spread by 2 routes, sexually transmitted disease or intravenous needles. So my 1-day-old isn't going to be having sex or doing heroin right away. So what's the purpose of getting this on the schedule in the first day of life, the first hours of life? And if you push, and I welcome anyone to do this with their doctor, you get to 2 things. You get to the American patients are too stupid to remember, so we need to do it right away. That's literally like what they say. And then my doctor told me that the child at daycare could trip over a needle that has hepatitis B on it. That's literally what they get to. That a needle could be on the playground, that somebody just did heroin or something, threw the needle down and it has hepatitis B blood on it. I asked the doctor, has there ever been in human history a case of hepatitis B being transferred that way? They said no. That it's only through intravenous needles and sex. So you actually, to steelman this, and again, welcome anyone to respond, there's not actually a scenario, absent of intravenous needles or sex, that a person gets hepatitis B. There is not a reason for this to be given. But it happened, and I saw this. It was a huge investment for this vaccine. It was a huge, huge economic problem. And this shouldn't be controversial. Think about being at these drug companies. You want the drug given out when you've made the investment. So they're able to work with their buddies at the FDA. They're able to use the studies. There's this constant feeling in the medical community that the American people are too stupid to ask a question or too stupid to remember to take these important drugs. So there's this argument and momentum to get on the schedule day 1. But there's not actually a medical
And so we haven't even discussed, I think you have proven the point that there's no good reason. The flip side is, are there good reasons not to take it? So let me just ask you, as a physician and a woman of childbearing age, what's your view?
I mean, there's not a single medication that exists that doesn't have side effects, and where there's not some, range of things that can happen when you inject something in the body. And for the Hep B vaccine in particular, I mean, the two of the handful of inactive ingredients are formaldehyde and aluminum, which is a neurotoxin. And of course, they'll say like, oh, for the body weight of the baby, it's negligible, whatever. But when you're getting several shots at one time, these things make a difference. You know, our bodies are overwhelmed right now with the amount of toxic inputs that are going in, and they're breaking our bodies, right? And so, you know, if it's not necessary for the vast majority of kids to have this at birth, and you could give it to them when they reach teenage years, right? And they're much bigger and their bodies can handle more of these, you know, these chemicals and toxins that are in these shots, then you have to ask yourself, why are we exposing the whole population to potential risk that any pharmaceutical medication will have, a risk of side effects, if it's not necessary? And that's a question that I think every parent should be able to ask, you know. But, you know, like Calley talks about, you follow the money, it's pretty sinister. I mean, you look at the American Academy of Pediatrics and like, who are their main funders? Mead Johnson, who makes formula, the company that makes influenza vaccines, Abbott Nutrition, which makes formula. You know, these people are funding the organization that cherry picks the research to make our pediatric guidelines. Okay, so there's hundreds of thousands of papers that are published every year about the importance of nutrition and exercise and sleep and avoiding pesticides and avoiding plastics in our foods. Just tens of thousands of papers every single year. But what goes into the guidelines, which are created by professional organizations like the American Diabetes Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, who are funded by things like processed food companies, pharmaceutical companies, and then, of course, in the case of the ADA, people like Coca-Cola and Cadbury. So, you know, people will always say,
Cadbury,
you know,
the
chocolate company, has
funded
millions for the American Diabetes Association.
Now,
so
come on.
Absolutely. This is just
I just want to say, because I don't want to ever sound judgy or pretend that I have good eating habits, because demonstrably I don't. They make great chocolate bars. Sure. They're awesome. But
they shouldn't be probably influencing our diabetes guidelines, right? I mean,
is that real? You're sure that's true?
I am certain that is true. We could all.
Anheuser-Busch shouldn't be funding, you know, Alcoholics Anonymous. It's just like these companies should exist.
But you know, we follow this cult of evidence-based medicine, right? Which is that we follow the guidelines, but the guidelines cherry pick research from the canon of scientific literature that's out there. Which is why when I was in medical school, there were just huge swaths of the science that I wasn't seeing.
If we pay extra, could we maybe get some grease or fat?